Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. 5 minutes late, but we're here. We're here. I'm still getting used to this technology and still trying to get myself acquainted with how it all works. Um, but we're here. Um, I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes to join, those who can join, and then we'll get started on the conversation for today. Um, And once you're in, let me know that you're in so that I can say hello to you. Simba, hi, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you here. It's good to have everybody here. It's good to see everybody. I hope where you are warm and cozy. We are getting lots of snow here in the outskirts of Toronto. Getting buried in snow, which is funny because we had no snow this time last year at all. So I guess Mother Nature is just paying us back. Margaret, hi, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining. I hope you will enjoy this conversation today and have the benefits of the chat today. Just give everybody another couple minutes and then we'll get started with the conversation today. Obviously, as usual, we will have this live available so that those who are maybe traveling from work or on their way home or it's late at night where they are, they can always catch up and watch in the morning. Today, we wanted to talk about reflections. Reflections. What do you see when you look in the mirror? What do you see? Who do you see? And how do you see? That's what we want to talk about today. Matthew, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoy the chat today. So, just to give a bit of background, many people who know me already know that my birthday falls right at the beginning of this month and will know that uh, I'm running a big birthday bash. So, this is an unashamed plug to say if you haven't already celebrated with me, go on to repurposedfoundation.com and give your little donation. I would love to send so many boys and girls who are in disadvantaged communities and vulnerable family backgrounds. I'd love to help to send them to school. So, and I cannot do it by myself. I need your help. So, unashamed plug as I wait for everyone to join. And just wanted to, you know, remind you go on to repurposefoundation.com, give your donation. And if you're in Canada, you can send an e transfer. All right, back to the topic at hand. Today we're talking about reflections. We're talking about what do you see and how do you see when you look in the mirror. And I was just going on about how I have a birthday at the top of the year. And I remember that when I was young, I hated that. I hated that so much because, being born and raised in Zimbabwe, there's this thing called January disease. And basically, what January disease was, it was when your parents had no money. All the bonus money and the Christmas pay was all spent on having a good time, over the Christmas holidays, and nothing's left, barely anything left in the start of the new year. And then school starts, and back home we paid school fees and we had new school uniform requirements or book bags and all those kind of things. After all those expenses had been taken care of, birthday presents and birthday parties were not a thing at all. So I hated having a birthday at the start of the year. But now as an adult, I'm actually very glad. I'm very fortunate to have a birthday at the top of the year because coupled with New Year's goals and New Year's ambitions, comes that whole new chapter, new birthday, and it's like a new opportunity to pause and reflect on how far I've come, how far I've still got to go, and where I've grown and what challenges I've come across and how I've overcome those challenges, or how I've learned, or what I've learned from those challenges. So I do find that it's kind of an advantage now as an adult. I'm like thankful that I can sort of set a trajectory for the year. So it was in thinking about all these resetting and new year, new things, new goals and all that stuff, that I came up with this topic for today, which is reflections. The dictionary defines reflecting as a moment to think quietly or calmly, to give something serious thought. So that means reflecting brings an increased self awareness. And we know that spending time in self reflection helps to build greater awareness, and you can recognize, so that you can recognize and understand your own emotions and the triggers and the behaviors that come out of those emotions. It's a time where you can ask yourself questions like, what made me behave that way? You know, uh, it's a time when you can pause and think, okay, what do I tend to do when I feel angry, or when I feel sad, when I feel lonely? This is how you become aware of some of the bad habits that you might have, that you might want to work on or improve on, or some behavior patterns that are triggered by those things. Or you could even discover that there's some healthy coping habits that you've developed that you can build on and reinforce, because they're triggered by specific emotions. So all I'm trying to say in a winded way, is that research shows that there's a lot of benefits that come from reflecting. And one of the benefits that I really wanted to hone in today was a deeper alignment with your core values. Deeper alignment with your core values as a benefit to self reflection. So, self reflection is a powerful tool for personal growth. And the heart behind today's conversation is just assessing how and what we think about ourselves, examining our emotions, our behaviors, and questioning, why do I feel this way? Why do I act this way when something happens and when something triggers you? Elder Angela, it's good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that today's chat will, have a little bit of a nugget for you to take away as well. So, self reflecting also helps us to do a little dig into our own thoughts and emotions, and the way those things impact the way we view ourselves. And that's where I really want to dig in a little bit more, is how we view ourselves. So, I'll pause here for a little bit and just ask the question again. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? What do you see? And how do you see? Who do you see? What do you see? And how do you see? Sadie, it's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. So, psychologists will tell you that self image is a conscious and subconscious way of seeing yourself. It's the emotional judgment that we make about our own self worth, and it's sometimes we do it without even recognizing it. Hey, Zadie, it's good to see you. This is because we form our self image through how we interact with other people. So, subconsciously or even consciously, or without even knowing it, the way people react when they are in your presence, you subconsciously measure yourself, and the way they categorize you you somehow find yourself putting yourself in a category. What I mean is, like, have you ever been in an environment and suddenly you feel, I am too small to be in this circle? Or you suddenly feel, I don't look like everybody else in this circle, and you kind of give yourself a judgment or a worth, so to speak. When you're with people who highly esteem you, you feel very confident, you feel very comfortable and welcomed, and you feel great. But when you're in circles that maybe nobody's esteeming you highly, you might think of yourself very lowly. So that's kind of how we measure ourselves, from just the way people interact with us. What we normally forget in those moments is that those people's reactions and responses to us are also filtered sometimes by their own things that they're going through. And that's the funny thing about human nature, is that we we tend to project. That is how we are as human beings. So someone walks in the room, they look really nice, and suddenly we give them a funny side eye look because they look nice, and we feel challenged that, oh, I could have looked nice as well. I'm just giving a very minimal type of example, but really, what I'm trying to say is that people are judging us, or making a reaction based on what they're going through, based on their own filters, and we're using that reaction to measure ourselves. How incredible that we could use things that are so inaccurate to measure our own self worth. That's why it's always so important to remember that you cannot use people's opinions as a basis of how you view yourself. Only you know yourself best. And that's why self reflection is a very good practice, because as you think through things and as you view the things that you do and the behaviors that you display or the thoughts that you go through, you know who you are better than anybody else. You know yourself. So I'll pause here and ask the question once more. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? What do you see? How do you see? It's good to see you, Cynthia. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining the live today. We're talking about reflections, and we're just talking about how we view ourselves through the thoughts that we entertain in our own minds. And I'm hoping that today's conversation will just challenge people to think a little bit differently on what they see when they look at themselves. And the first question we're going to address today is, who do you see? Who are you really? Do you really know yourself? You know, there's a danger in believing you are who people or society says you are. And it's so subtle, but it's so common, you know. Just because you're very good at something doesn't mean that that is who you are. Some people are just very talented and can do certain things. But what you do is not really always what defines you. Can you remember a time before the world and life placed so many filters on your perception? Can you remember who you were? I was trying to think about this week because my daughter just turned 16, and I was trying to remember when I was 16. I was trying to remember how carefree I was about certain things and how I see that same carefreeness in her, and I'm thinking, you have no idea, girl. But it's because the world hasn't filtered her perspective with disappointment and hurt and cautiousness as a result. You know, maybe you were someone who was so optimistic and so full of hope and so, had that everything is possible type of mentality, until the disappointments of life come and you're just so hesitant about everything, and you're so calculated, you know. Who have you become because of the things that you've experienced? And have you lost touch with who you really were before you experienced the things you experienced? And they don't have to be negative things. You could have enjoyed such a great and wonderful um, season of prosperity or great or good things, that in all of that goodness, you still lost yourself. You still lost who God wanted you to be. You still lost your purpose. So the question is, when you look in the mirror, who do you really see? Are you seeing this facade that you've built up over time and you just have to maintain? Or are you really seeing you in your divinely created purpose? And do you like who you see? Sometimes you might find yourself in situations where, and I've already talked about this, you're pretending to be someone else. And sometimes we do that. I know I do that. I walk into an environment, especially a work environment, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I am not as smart as everyone in this room. But I walk in there with this head held high, and I want to fit and play a part and look like it. Hey, I'm just as equally qualified as the next person to be here. And maybe sometimes that's good. But when that becomes a facade that you have to maintain, and you have to really go through a whole, I need to maintain this look, I need to maintain this um, appearance. I've made people think I have money, so I have to dress a certain way all the time. Or I've made people think I have such a happy, peaceful life. It becomes so taxing to maintain this. And without realizing it, some of us are just carrying a facade and thinking that that's who we are. But today I want you to think about that. Who are you really? And why did you drop who you were? Maybe it's things beyond your control, but can you find yourself again? Thanks, Sandra. It's great to hear that these questions are really thought-provoking. They really were for me as I was writing my notes down. It's things that I've been journaling through the past few weeks, just self-reflecting and asking myself, who am I really? And what am I doing about who I am? How am I living out my purpose with the time that God has given me on earth? So I guess all I'm trying to say is, do you see your true self, or do you see a version of yourself that you think you should be because that's how people want to see you? Um, there's a famous quote, and I forget who wrote it, but it goes something like, just be yourself because everyone else is already taken. And that's true. Sometimes we try, as children, we try to emulate the people we look up to, you know. Um, I remember that I used to have this teacher when I was in grade one, always had red nails, always had hair so meticulous, and I always wanted to be like her. So there's being inspired by someone um, to be, maybe well kept or just well groomed, and then there's trying to be them, and that is where the line becomes a bit on the negative side. When you try to be somebody else, you can be inspired, but you're not trying to turn yourself into them. So who are you really? Who are you? I have firstborn syndrome, and I won't lie, I won't even hide about it, because I think for myself, I having lost my parents very young, I was always told, you're the eldest, you have to set an example, you have to set an example. But I didn't know what that example was. So I started to build a version of what I thought was an example. You know, do well in school, don't be naughty, don't go to parties, get married, stay in church, and all these things. And none of that is bad. I'm not saying none of it is any bad at all. But a lot of it was done out of just because I was told I must set an example. And in setting an example, I think sometimes I didn't know who I was. I was just doing things because I wanted to see a smile on somebody's face. And so I'm here, little old lady now, but now reflecting back and going, okay, those decisions, that one decision over there in my life, that wasn't me. That is not things I enjoy. That is not something that sets my heart alive. I just did it because I thought I had to. And I hope that this conversation frees somebody from doing something that they think they have to. Because the only thing you have to do is please your maker. That's the only thing you have to do. The next question is, what do you see? What do you see when you look in the mirror? You know, most of us are very quick to look at the surface level. And we quickly dismiss ourselves because we want to avoid the negative thoughts of self-loathing and self-criticism that most of us have entertained for years. I'll add here that it does take a lot of intentionality and self-discipline to actually shut those thoughts out. And more so for us as women. It's just so hard to look in the mirror and not go, oh my gosh, I got so many wrinkles. Oh, my hair's going gray. My face looks so round. Oof, gaining so much weight. It's so hard to discipline ourselves to see more than just that. More than just what we see on the surface. Listen, if you can't see more than what's on the surface of yourself, how's the next person going to see more? How's somebody else going to see more? You know, when they talk about loving yourself, I've been really thinking a lot about that, because it says, you know, you think about, there's these Instagram reels that go around, say, think about the first 3 people that you love. What are the first 3 names that come into your mind? And then at the end it says, of all of those names, not one of them was your own name. And I'm so guilty of that, you know. And so you want to think about, okay, if I can look at someone and say, oh my gosh, you're so kind. Oh, you're so generous, and you're so smart. But I never say those things to myself. And I'm not trying to say people be conceited or be proud. I'm just trying to say, see more than just what's on the surface, even for yourself. So what do you see when you look in the mirror? Can we stop looking at our outer selves and judging ourselves harshly? That's what I have in my notes here. I've got, I'm fat, I'm old, I'm ugly. Stop the foolishness. It starts with you. When you stop thinking so negatively about yourself, anything other people say will not have a strong effect on you. Remember at the beginning, we were talking about how people's words can trigger an emotion, and an emotion or a thought then triggers a behavior. You know, you can be with people, you know, some people that are in my community like to say things like, ooh, yeah, you've gained weight, you've gained weight, you know. And immediately I find myself going home and starving myself because, you know, somebody said I've gone fat now, I've gained weight, and so I'm going to starve myself. Okay, remember the self-worth conversation? Discipline yourself into saying positive and beautiful things about yourself, not in a proudful way, but acknowledging when there's things you need to correct in your life, but also being very aware of all the good things that you do in your life for yourself. So what do you see? Can we change the narrative and say, I see a strong and courageous person? Or maybe I see a kind and generous soul. Or I see a quiet and calculative person who's very gentle with their decisions. Don't stop at the surface. You are more than what meets the eye. And finally, I want to talk about how do you see? What filters are you looking through when you look at yourself? Sometimes, like I said earlier, the words and the actions of people we love or value or esteem can ring so loudly in our minds that it's hard to see ourselves past what those people have said. I want to share with you a little story of a boy named Mark. I won't say his last name just in case he's watching or watches this live later. But Mark was a boy in my grade one class. And you know what? Even if he does watch this, he might not even remember this incident because that's how things work, right? You, the one who was offended, remembers it, but the person who did it probably did it in jest or in just having a good time and has totally forgotten about it. And here you are suffering through it and, you know, going through all these things. But anyway, I was in grade one, and for some reason, those who were born back in the day and lived in Zimbabwe, you'll know that our schools were segregated by race. And but for some reason, I don't know how, my father managed to get me into a school that was originally designated only for the white children. So I was the only black kid in my school, starting grade one, and couldn't speak a syllable of English. Grace, it's good to see you. I hope you are going to enjoy this chat. We've just a little bit left to go, but it's good to see you here. I'm talking about the story of a little boy called Mark that was in my grade one class. So we had gone on a field trip to a farm. We were studying about combine harvesters and stuff like that. And we'd gone to this farm. And then after the field trip, we were going to go swimming in the pool at this. It was another boy in my class. They owned a farm and we were doing the field trip at their farm. And we were swimming, and I didn't know how to swim. That's another thing. I couldn't speak English and didn't know how to swim. But here we are in the pool. And I think I went underwater and came back up, and I went, you know that feeling, And I opened my eyes so big because I thought I was dying. But anyway, Mark turns around and said, "You have such big eyes." As a little girl, I remember that made me feel so ugly. I was already so self-aware that I was the only person of color. And I didn't know how to do a lot of things my classmates knew how to do. Couldn't even really clearly express myself or communicate because I was still learning English. And here comes this little boy telling me that I have big eyes. Googly eyes was the word he used. I spent a good portion of my elementary school life doing this to my eyes, trying to make them small because Mark had said I had big eyes. It took someone special, probably, I think, in high school, telling me that I was the most beautiful girl that they'd ever seen to break that spell. I'm using a story from my childhood as an example, but I think even as adults we suffer from this syndrome. And I already gave the example where someone says, hey, you've gained weight. Or someone says, hey, the hair's graying. Or just some things like, you made a bad decision here, or how could you do that? And we go home and we're in this very sad and sorry state because of the words somebody has spoken. Maybe you made some bad decisions in the past, and now you feel unqualified to be in certain circles because of the words people have spoken. Listen, My opinion is if you learned from that mistake, then you're already more educated than those people who are judging you. You're already ahead. Obviously, if you didn't learn something, then hey, yeah, we have something to talk about. But you're already ahead. You've already been educated in something. You've already got what we call lessons learned. Again, self awareness helps you to recognize and move forward. It helps you to recognize the triggers that cause a depressive way of thinking or that cause a self loathing way of thinking, and then you can dismiss those thoughts and intentionally think positive things about yourself. I just want to plug in here, please forgive yourself for the things, the gut feelings, the red flags, the signs, whatever it was that you ignored because you wanted things to be different. Forgive yourself because you know better now. You've learned from it and now you're the wiser for it. So that's it for tonight, guys. I hope that you found some nuggets in this conversation that were helpful. I hope this conversation actually serves as a pulse check on our emotional and behavioral triggers. But most of all, I hope that you were inspired to give yourself more grace and more love. Here's to peace, to hope, to joy, and to love.